It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Locked On Lakers podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin. I'm joined by Pete Zayas. Pete, the Lakers are evened up in this series 1-1, and apparently Rajon Rondo is the MVP of the league right now.
Always believed in him.
I have since gone back and scrubbed all of the podcasts in which I said anything about him. We're going to talk about Rondo. We're going to talk about the game in general. The Lakers put on two of the most just dominating defensive quarters you're ever going to see against Houston in the first and fourth. And that's where I wanted to start, was with that fourth quarter, because you're heading into it. I believe the Lakers were down 2 or 3 points, something like that, a bucket. And that felt like gut check time. That felt like,
I was like, we're about to learn what this Lakers team is about. I said that. I said that to someone in a DM.
Yeah, that felt like, all right, this is time to put up or shut up. And this also, like I was doing the Silver Screen pod with Jas, and one of the things that I said there was, in every series that a team loses, you can always look back at the game that they actually lost it in. No,
that's a great point. I love that. Yeah.
And like the in 08, the Lakers lost game 4, and that was it.
When they gave away that big lead. Yep.
Yeah. And this, like, had they lost this game, that would have been the game. This would have been it. That if they lose this
4
series,
out of 5 is a tough night.
Yeah. And the fact that they were, kind of faced with that situation and faced with that potential outcome, and just dug deep and held Houston to 17 points in the fourth quarter. I'm sure we could go through all of the quarters that Houston has played this year, and I would be shocked if there was another one that they only scored 17 points in. I don't think
that was an impressive performance.
Yeah.
Now, really,
go ahead. Sorry. Well, I was just going to ask, what happened?
Man, super interesting game on the defensive end. We started out very well. We trapped Harden with great effectiveness in the first quarter, and we took a lot of our defensive attention off of Russell Westbrook. We've got AD on Westbrook as an assignment from the beginning of a play, and what that allows AD to do is roam a little bit, right? Because if you give up that rotational 3 to Westbrook, like, you live with that. You be okay, and that allowed AD
by that screenshot, which is one of the rudest things
that's right
that you're ever gonna see. Where Russ is standing there at the wing with the ball, and nobody is within 15 feet of him.
That's right, and the Lakers did a great job of, when you bring that extra tension onto Harden with the trap, you got to take it away from somewhere. And they did a great job of deciding and executing how to take it away from there, right? Because if not everybody is locked in on their closeouts and on their rotations, you might mean to have it end up in Russ's hands, but it actually ends up with PJ Tucker in the corner for a 3. And we had a couple of, it was interesting. That was such a game indicative of the Lakers' mentality. When we're locked in, we're dominant defensively. And we saw, like, we double teamed Harden, so that makes it 4-on-3 everywhere else, putting us at a disadvantage. But we're so fast on our rotations when we are really locked in that ends up with Robert Covington, PJ Tucker, those guys having to attack closeouts and make drive and kick decisions their own. Like, it's one thing if it's Russ or Harden on a drive and kick. If we've got those guys driving and kicking, all of a sudden we've got a great advantage there. So, but we started to slip a little bit, right? As we got more confident, we got more cocky kind of about, like, oh, we got this. We had big, like, we got this type of energy. And they've got a haymaker. They scored 17 in that fourth quarter, but in the third, they scored 41. They smoked us in the first 6 minutes of that quarter. And a big part of that, they made a nice adjustment, Houston did, of they dragged that trap out farther away and made sure that Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker were on the wing and corner, Gordon on the wing, Tucker in the corner on the weak side. So when that skip pass happened, Gordon's great at that wing 3, and then Tucker is great at that corner 3. And when combined with kind of like a more relaxed approach, we give up 41. Then
And
in the
also a
fourth
further
quarter,
run. Like you're asking
yes.
Danny Green to run all the way across the court.
No, that's a great point. That's absolutely the case. That's the reason that Harden would back dribble and bring those two defenders with him more. And so that makes, like you said, that you've got to recover a farther distance, and that's a tough ask. And then in the fourth quarter, we mixed it up a little more. You made a great point on Twitter talking about mixing it up, and we started to incorporate a 1-2-2 or a 3-2 zone, depending on how you choose to define it. I call it a 1-2-2. We started using some 1-2-2 zone, which I thought was a great adjustment because the Rockets are so built on that 5-out spacing. And in order to do that, you have to have 2 guys on the wings and 2 guys in the corner. And zones are weak in the spots where guys aren't, but it's going to be strong against the wings because the 2 guys on
you're
the
matching
elbow.
the zone with where they're going to be standing anyway.
Right. And it can be tough on corner shooters, but we've got the athletes between AD and Kuzma and LeBron to be able to close out to those corner shooters from there. So I thought like it was the first we did a couple possessions in the first game, but we used it more, especially in that fourth quarter. I love the zone adjustment. So this was just a super interesting game of back and forth adjustments, great playoff basketball, and Lakers really flipped that switch from that 41-point quarter to that 17-point quarter.
It's great because, we're going to go back and rewatch it, and it's going to be actually fun to rewatch it. Like there are those games that you have to go back and rewatch, and you're like, fuck, I don't know.
You're telling me doing this job, like I still have the same fan feelings of like, man, I don't want to listen to fucking podcasts or radio or watch TV after a Lakers loss. Now I have to make those things. No, I didn't want to listen to it when I was just not covering the team. I don't like if we lost a playoff game, like it's radio silence. I didn't listen to any of that. And now I got to create the stuff, right? When we lose a game. So this is going to be a lot more entertaining to do that.
Yeah, I want to get back because that was a point that I'm not here to pat myself on the shoulder, but I always feel like when you're going up against a great offensive player, you cannot just imagine facing a great a great hitter in baseball and just throwing fastballs at him. Just imagine you're going up against a great tennis player and every time you're hitting the ball, it's always down the sideline. It's always at their forehand. It's always at their backhand. Even if it's their weakness that you're going up against, this is going to be, they're going to fall into a rhythm at some point.
Yeah, just that variance in mixing it up in what they see, there's a great deal of value in that because basketball is so great because like it's got that rock, paper, scissors quality to it where, rock beats scissors, but scissors beats paper and paper beats rock. And if you're doing the same thing every time, like something's going to beat it. There's something that beats every type of defense.
Yeah.
It's got a weakness. Every defense has a weakness and it's got strengths. And if you're just seeing the same thing over and over again, it becomes very easy decision. And basketball is so decision heavy that's absolutely the case. You got to mix it up.
Yeah. I was getting kind of frustrated during that third quarter because it just felt like not only when Harden was backing up, not only did they, because usually when a player backs up like that, the person trapping can just back off. That's where you want him to go. Right. If he's backing up to 50 feet away from the basket, you say, we did our job. We're good here. And what was kind of frustrating to watch was that Harden's backing up and we're going out and we're chasing him. And I'm saying this is a playoff game.
That's
when
right.
I'm saying
when
we.
You are. Yeah, I love it.
But when the Lakers are going out there and chasing him 50 feet away from the basket, you're enabling him to become like he's a special passer. Like he's gonna and he's very smart. Like this is actually part of the reason why I hate him goading for fouls, because I think he's a fantastic player, doesn't have to do that crap. But he's so good at, basically if you think like a quarterback, sitting back in the pocket and using that space and using that time to pick you apart. And the Lakers, I thought in the third quarter, were really allowing him to do so. And in the fourth quarter, they used all these different methods of going at him. And also, by the way, staying super disciplined with wherever the ball was going. Like the other thing that was pissing me off in the third quarter was that they weren't being disciplined. We're going to go double Eric Gordon on this one. We're going to go double Russell Westbrook on this one. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. when Eric Gordon has the ball, just make sure you either contest the 3-pointer or don't let him get all the way to the 3-point line. But you don't need to go double him, and you definitely don't need to go double Russell Westbrook 30 feet away from the basket. You don't even have to fucking guard him out there. So just like back off and let him make his own mistake. And eventually in the fourth quarter, he did.
I thought a lot of that everything you're describing there are mental mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the lack of focus, the lack of like, do we really want to rotate off of Gordon again so he hits his fifth free? Like this guy's on fire. Maybe it's those types of things that when you've got that, like, oh, we got this type mentality. And I'm glad Lakers got Houston's haymaker in that third quarter, right? Like they can't. I remember this game earlier in the regular season, right, where we went down like 15-0 or 15-2 or something like that to the Washington Wizards. We ended up winning by 30 or something like that, right? Those stretches where you're like, we're fine. This is a Houston team that is tremendously equipped to jump all over you when you let your guard down. So we've got to really, like, when we were locked in this game on defense, we saw it in that first quarter, we saw it in that fourth quarter and parts of the second. When we defend like that, like they can't hang with us, but if we don't bring our best, they are going to smoke us in those minutes, and they did tonight.
Yep. Let's take a quick second here. When we come back, we have to talk about Rondo. We have to. I am contractually obligated. And
it was great.
And we'll get to that. Let's take a quick second. We'll get to that. Today's show is brought to you in part by DoorDash. Look, I don't know about you guys, but for my wife and I, we could not possibly have gotten through this entire situation without the help of drivers for DoorDash. And the fact that we now are partnered with them in this way is actually the kind of thing that, like, when I saw that we were partnered with them, it was something that I could not have been happier to announce and then try to get you guys to support. They have every type of food that you might be looking for. They have partnerships with restaurants that are national chains. They have mom and pop restaurants in their directory. Personally, I try to lean towards helping out the mom and pop shop restaurants because those are the ones that were hit the hardest over all of this, and DoorDash makes that incredibly easy to do. They have the contactless delivery, which has been great for somebody like me who I'm there every so often. I have to run back, change Avery's diaper, and I'm doing so while the food might be getting dropped off there. They can just set it out there. I go pick it up when I have a chance, and it's going to be nice and fresh, and I can just kind of go about my day in the best and smoothest way possible, and it's all because of the way that DoorDash handles their business. And right now, our listeners can get $5 off and $0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKEDONNBA. That's $5 off your first delivery and $0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget, that's Locked On NBA is your promo code for $5 off your first order with DoorDash.
NFL teams making bold final moves before the start of the season. From our local experts to your ears, these are the biggest stories on the Locked On Podcast Network. The Tennessee Titans have announced a one-year deal with linebacker Jadeveon Clowney, reportedly worth $15 million. Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans tells you if it's going to be enough to get Tennessee back to the AFC title game. In other moves around the league, the Miami Dolphins named Ryan Fitzpatrick starting quarterback, which means Tua will be back up for the time being. And the Detroit Lions have agreed to a one-year deal with running back Adrian Peterson. Peterson was released by the Washington football team last Friday. For more NFL news and analysis, subscribe to the new Peacock and Williamson NFL show and listen to a brand new lineup on Locked On NFL. They'll have division previews every day this week. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is where I find Twitter funny, like legitimately funny to me. And I'll see people on Twitter, and my mentions are all basically, oh, you're probably so pissed you have to talk about Rondo because he was good, and you actually have to compliment Rondo because he was good. And my thing is, like, Rajon Rondo helped my favorite team win a playoff game that they absolutely had to fucking win. So
yes, he did. We get mad at him because he plays like crap. And if if anybody, it's not personal, man. Like, we're rooting for the Lakers.
Yeah.
We want all of those guys to play well. If guys play like crap, we're not going to like them. If guys play well, we're going to be all about it. And he was freaking great tonight.
Yeah. So I want to get down to why he was great and figure out whether or not it's sustainable. And there are a couple things. Do I think he's going to be a plus 28 very often moving forward? Probably not. But I've always thought that the way that you make Rajon Rondo the most effective is by getting out and running, right? Because he's going to be playing, especially if he's playing in single big sets or lineups where AD is your big. You get AD out there and you run. Because if you're in the half court with Rondo out there, and you're asking AD to go get you a bucket, well, that means you're going to have an extra defender in the middle of the key because Rondo is out there. But if you're running, Rondo is very good at making those decisions there, and the defense isn't set, and that's a more manageable situation. And I thought, in the minutes that Rondo was in there, the Lakers were getting stops necessary to get out and run, and then B, I thought he was doing a very good job at forcing the issue and forcing everybody to get out there and run. LeBron, I thought, did it the best, but that's LeBron James. But I thought Rondo in particular, like, if he's going to be good, if we're going to see playoff Rondo, it's going to be in the transition game.
That's a great point. That lineup, I love. So we benched Dwight in this game, right?
Yeah.
And
which I don't think is going to continue because JaVale's hurt.
Yeah, it depends on the severity of JaVale's injury. But we went with some no big lineups, right?
Yeah.
So that lineup of Rondo, Caruso, LeBron, Kuz, and Morris, right? They played 8.5 minutes. They were a plus 21.
Yeah.
They shot 14 of 16. All four of Markieff Morris's first quarter threes were assisted by Rondo, and they were all like rhythm type shots or spot ups with your feet set. They were like the little nuances of a point guard, and that are the difference between Rondo and Caruso, right? That in the way that, like, in transition, I'm going to, it's like, say, it's not a fast break, but I'm going to dribble and kind of dribble in front of your defender. So when I kick it back to you, you're stepping in, and I'm setting this totally legal, moving screen, right? But it's legal, and I'm just going to run interference. And it's like those little nuances, or that, he fired a great skip pass to the corner for the fourth three that Morris hit. But what I was most impressed by was his defense. That was the most, we're talking about being locked in. He was deep in a stance. When he was on the weak side, he was, very smart and engaged. He had 5 steals tonight, and that's one of, not always a great measurable stat, but that was indicative of he's a guy that, because he's so smart, he can be a half step. He can anticipate, right? He can see what's about to happen. And those guys can be, even when they're not great on-ball defenders, they can be really good help defenders, because the the offensive player on the other side of the court is often having to make a skip pass decision. Do I go here or there? And if he knows where they're going to go, like a split second ahead of time, he can get there. And he had, a few steals that were of that nature. And that was something with Rondo where, like, we need a second ball handler, but if you can't defend on this team, especially, like, I just don't see a spot for you. That was the best defensive performance of Rondo's tenure as a Laker. And if we get that guy, in terms of, like, it was nice to see that he could do it. That's the type of thing, like, if you can do it once, you can do it again, because it wasn't something that he did anything outside of his capability. He was just so much more engaged in this than he is during the regular season, that, like, we always heard about playoff Rondo, and in game 1, it sure wasn't playoff Rondo, hadn't played for a long time. This guy right here, that's a game changer. That's a guy that we saw tonight can be a big contributor for what we're hoping to do.
I still am not comfortable with 29 minutes of Rajon Rondo.
29 minutes of that Rajon Rondo, I'm totally fine with.
Well, I just don't think we're going to get that Rajon. Like, that's the best Rajon Rondo that we're going to get.
That's fine. Then don't play him 29 minutes tonight, so we don't get that guy. But tonight, I got no problem with it.
Yeah, so here's my one bit of cold water I'm going to throw on the equation here. if you look at the number of performances that we've seen from Rajon Rondo, the ones like this are exponentially outnumbered by game one, right? Game one type performances.
I mean, but he's never played in a playoff game for us either.
Well, but
right?
I'm saying, but like just in general though, like what we've seen, he's played in meaningful games. Like he's played in games that matter and not look great in those ones.
I mean, sort of like they're not meaningful like playoff games.
Sure,
you know?
But I mean, game one was a playoff game, and he was awful. Like he was bad out there.
He was awful. He was, and we'll see, right? There's also got to be some degree of slack for like he hadn't played in 5-6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm just saying, like this guy tonight, there's no reason he can't get in a defensive stance. There's no reason he can't be engaged on the weak side. There's no reason he can't push the ball in transition and hit shooters trailing on kickbacks, right? Like the way that he, like, yes, if we're just strictly talking how many good games has he had with us versus how many bad games, of course, but it was because of like how he played, because he was dying on screens, because he wasn't defending, because he wasn't, the ball would stick with him. I'm just saying, like, the things that he did tonight, he can do that again. It's not like he hit 4 out of 6 from 3 or something that's like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. He can push the ball again. He can do all, get in a stance. He can be on the weak side. That's why I'm like, I'm more encouraged than I am like worried that this is just an apparition that's only going to happen once.
I guess I've seen too much of Rondo to just willingly go out there and say, great, Lakers got playoff Rondo. This is fantastic.
No, I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying tonight was repeatable.
Yeah, I think here's where I think it's the most repeatable. They're going up against Russell Westbrook. And that gives you somebody, because Rondo, like when I think he's at his best defensively, he's not getting blown by the person he's guarding, which he's going to get blown by shooters, right? Like people who are he has to pay attention to as a perimeter threat from 3-point range, and you have to get up into their body. Those guys are going to go by him whenever they want. But with Westbrook, he can back off a little bit, and it gives him an extra step to be able to keep Russ in front of him. The other thing too is because Westbrook is so bad as a shooter, Rondo can also go out there and just wreak havoc as kind of a rover, and now you're allowing him to be his best type of team defender.
Right. That plays into his strength defensively. Right.
Yeah. So I would say, like, if I were Vogel, one thing, or not even trying to give Vogel any kind of advice here, but one thing to watch for, I think, is will Rondo's minutes match up as best as they possibly can with Westbrook's minutes? Because I think those going up against Westbrook is I think that's the best version of defensive Rondo that you're going to get, which, by the way, if you get a good version of a defensive Rondo, that means you can get out and transition more effectively than if you're getting the ball out of the basket.
That lineup that was the plus 21 in 8.5 minutes, those are the minutes when Harden's on the bench, right? And the offense is being led by Houston. The offense is being led by Westbrook. So that particular lineup against that particular group, really, that was a great, that's the time to play that group. And it speaks to your point.
Yep. Let's take one more quick second here. When we come back, I want to talk about Anthony Davis. I want to talk about LeBron, and I want to talk about how we look at this series now moving forward. Today's show is also brought to you in part by Built Bar. Look, you guys are, potentially still enjoying your guys' long weekend, and you might have had a few adult beverages, and sometimes because of that, you forget to fully nourish yourself and nourish your body to keep up with your busy schedule over this fun and busy weekend. And the best way that I have found that I can do that is just pack a couple of those Built Bars in the cooler that I pack everything else in. And as I realize, oh crap, I haven't eaten since so-and-so time, I'll just reach into the bag, grab one of those bars, knock it out really quickly, and I am now well equipped to deal with whatever I'm going to put my body through over the course of a long weekend. And BuiltBar.com is where you're going to find this great product. And if you enter promo code LOCKEDON, you will be able to get $10 off not just your first order, but all of your subsequent orders. And so what I'm telling you to do is, again, go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKEDON, save $10 off your orders, and then tell your friends. When you're out there enjoying this long weekend and you reach into your cooler, maybe pack an extra one. Show your friend and say, hey, you got to try this out. It's a cheat code. And then maybe tell them, hey, if you're going to check out BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKED and you save locked on, and you'll save $10. So again, that's BuiltBar.com, promo code LOCKED ON, to try and eat and enjoy the best protein bars on the market.
You're up to date on your favorite team, but what about the competition?
Here we go!
John Hollinger and Nate Duncan are evaluating every bubble contender on Hollinger and Duncan. Rejecting the Screen goes behind the scenes with in-depth interviews, and the Locked On NBA podcast is recapping games daily. Let the Locked On NBA network of podcasts take care of your NBA bubble scouting reports. Hollinger and Duncan, Rejecting the Screen, the Locked On NBA podcast. Subscribe to the best trio of NBA podcasts on the planet, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, so I recorded this the podcast immediately after the game with Jas, and he called me basically a wet blanket, a party pooper, all these things, because he asked me about Anthony Davis, and I told him I'm still not thrilled with his approach, and not all of it is necessarily his fault. I some of the way Davis is going about his scoring is a result of the way that they're asking him to go about his scoring. So it's not.
Was that 15 for 24 tonight not to your liking?
Well, 15 of 24 on a lot of step back and fade away contested twos. He only shot 6 free throws. That is like that. If you were to ask me, hey, if I would just tell you, Pete, Anthony Davis only shot 6 free throws in the game, do you think that was a good game? Would you think that would be a good game most nights?
That stat on its own would not be enough to make a determination. Like, obviously you want him to make more, but that midi that matters in the playoffs. That shot is a big shot in the playoffs, and like he's been. I mean, if it wasn't shooting so well on him, but like he's been smoking hot since the beginning of the playoffs on those shots. And I thought he did a good job. He's done a good job of like getting into a rhythm and into a bounce. Like he's much less effective when he's rigid and it's face up, right? But it's like jab step back, attacking closeouts, floaters, things like that. I loved AD's game. Like, is he going to take some difficult shots that he's going to miss? And when he misses them, you're like, oh, that's a terrible shot. But he's making a lot of those, man. They're superstar shots. It's like why you build your team around superstars is that, like, there's so much talk about Harden being this elite post defender now. Like, not against Anthony Davis has smoked him on every switch. And like, I don't know, man, like I'm of the let that man cook as long as he is doing that. That's an important shot in the playoffs.
Yeah, look, so long as he's making them okay. But you know me, I'm a slave to process, man. Like I am a slave to process, and like generally speaking, the best Anthony Davis is not falling away or drifting side to side facing the basket. Like that's not the kind of Davis that I prefer to see. Now, just like we talked about earlier, so PJ Tucker is an elite defender, right? I think we would. So, just like we talked about with James Harden being an elite offensive player, one thing I want to see from Davis is continue to mix it up with Tucker. And I thought there were stretches where he did. Like one of my favorite, the most like rambunctious I got in response to a play in the game was the ball found Davis in the corner. Tucker closed out hard on him. He pump faked, got a shoulder by him. He was a little off balance, right? But he went baseline and made like a layup, going to the basket or kind of fading away to the basket. But still, it was a drive to the basket that he scored on. And that got me the most stoked about a Davis play, because I think it's important that Tucker does see Davis go straight by him on occasion. just to
It
keep
is,
him on.
right? It's not just jumpers. Sure.
Yeah, and like if Davis, if Davis is making or taking, 7 or 8 of those tough mid-range fall-away jumpers, that's a fine number for me. But I do want more free throws from him. Like, that's just 6 free throws is not, to me, very indicative of the kind of game I think is sustainable from Davis moving forward.
All right, I'll let him know.
All right, last thing here. I want to talk about LeBron. To me, him pushing the ball as hard as he did in the fourth quarter symbolized he knows how to beat these guys now. Like, it's just that if I were a Houston fan, seeing him push it so, like, go out of his way to push it so hard on offense, that would make me really nervous as if I was a Rockets fan, because that's him identifying a weakness, understanding how to beat said weakness, and also having the skill set to just absolutely dominate those guys because of that weakness that they have. That like, of everything that we saw in the game tonight, whether it's playoff Rondo showing up, whether it's Markieff Morris knocking down shots, Kuzma going 6 of 7, Davis going 15 of 24, to me, what makes me the most excited or confident in how the series might play out was the way LeBron pushed it, because that he can't be guarded in those spots.
No, they can't guard him in transition. That's why, like, when we're at our best, we're gonna look like a conquering horde, like an army, like a
remember Loot Train?
Mongolian army.
Loot Train in Game of Thrones, where like the horse riders or whatever were like riding on their horse. And then you think that's intimidating enough because they're like standing up on their horse and firing off bows, arrows and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, that looks awful. And then over the top flies a freaking dragon. Like, that to me is when the Lakers look their best.
Yeah.
And then you have LeBron, it's a freaking dragon. That's
it would like the right. No, the Dothraki. Yeah.
There you go. There's the word. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. That's and when he really asserted himself in transition that's something that Houston can't stop. Houston's also a team, like, they're novel. There's a great deal of novelty. So the longer the series goes on, the more we have an advantage.
Saw this with OKC too.
Like, teams eventually start to figure out Houston. It's a different style of basketball. Like, they're playing a slightly different sport than everybody else is. And that combined with, the long layoff and all of that, Houston's best opportunities in this series are going to be earlier in this series. That's why this win was so big, right? Like, the further this gets into the series, the more we'll have answers and solutions for what they do, because what they do doesn't change that much. They'll make small adjustments within, to react to our adjustments, but they're fundamentally who they are is not going to change. And that assertiveness from LeBron is going to be just crucial the rest of the series, because that's the other thing that we can do and compromise a defense, aside from, AD shooting those contested 16-footers, right? Is that they don't really have anybody who can, like, they have to send so much attention to LeBron that it creates opportunities. Our shooters were really good in this one, right? Hopefully that's the one thing that I'm, if our shooters don't quite shoot so well, maybe this is we're speaking a little differently. But I did see what you're talking about there, of just like the team and LeBron specifically just figuring them out a little more.
Yeah, that's the big one. And then the other thing too, with LeBron pushing it the way that he does, like, Covington can't pick up those fouls to stop transition play. Tucker can't pick up those fouls. You can't waste fouls on stuff like that if you're those two players, because those, in my opinion, aside from Harden, those are the two most important Rockets on that roster. And so if the Lakers can actually get out and run and make a point of doing so enough consistently throughout the game, I just don't see how the Rockets beat them. Before we get out of here, I think both you and I had the Lakers winning this series, right? Does this game and the way it played out make you feel any differently about how quickly they can do so, or do you still think this is a relatively lengthy series?
Yeah, I still think that I think 6 games, 7 games, I think that they pose some problems for us, right? And we're a team that's it's going to be so dependent upon how focused we can be, because we've done this throughout the season of like having these points where we're just not as locked in as we were earlier in the game, and Houston will smoke us in those minutes in ways that other teams don't. And it really is going to swing and hinge on that. Is, do we take them seriously when we've got a 12-point lead? Are we still rotating and still making sure we're doing the things that got us that 12, 15-point lead? Because we saw, man, we were up 16, and then I know some people like went to the bathroom or to get something from the fridge and came back like, what the hell? Like, because it went away quick, and they will do that. So that said, we shot well, which we'll see if, that's something we can't always count on, but we did survive a 22 for 53 performance from them. They hit 22 threes and we won the game. So there is some degree of they got hot as well, which will happen from time to time. But I do think that the longer it goes, I think 6-7 games is where this series is going to go.
Yeah, I don't see the Lakers winning 4 straight against Houston. But I don't see Houston winning 2 more. So I think this I think this still finishes at 6, maybe 5, depending on how disciplined the Lakers are and how often they hit shots. Like, I don't know if we can rely on Markieff making 4 out of 5 3-pointers.
Sure.
But even there, though, like KCP only goes 2 of 5. Danny Green goes 3 of 6. The one to pay attention to is Rondo's shooting. He only goes 1 of 5 on the night from 3-point range and was still a plus 28. And given how wide open he's going to be, as soon as he gets into more of a rhythm, I feel like he's going to hit maybe 1 or 2 more of those.
Yeah, that's going to be a 2 for 5 type. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I don't want to turn this into a big math problem here because it was a fun enough night in and of itself, and there are very few better buzzkills than math lessons. But I still think, if the Lakers can get out and run, and we got to see what's going on here with JaVale's foot, and whether or not Dwight just steps in. If JaVale is hurt, do you think Dwight just starting?
Dwight not playing at all, I think spoke kind of volumes. I wonder if they go with Morris or if they go with Kuzma, if they just go away from that entirely. I'm very curious to see because Dwight's issues are on the perimeter defensively. That's why they hunted him. He played 8 minutes in the first half, and they attacked him as often as they could. Right. And then it was 3 minutes in the second half, and then he didn't play at all in this game, which I thought was a really fantastic adjustment by Vogel. With JaVale being out, he can't quite replicate. JaVale's a little better on the perimeter defensively than Dwight is. Yeah. That said, that lineup, we talk about the starters so often, right? But that lineup, that small ball lineup that we had of no bigs, preserving that lineup against the non-Harden lineups, those Westbrook-led groups that you pointed out, is, I think, we're not going to go plus 21 and shoot 14 for 16 or whatever ridiculous thing. Yeah. But I do think that we have
15. Can it be 13?
I think that's a great lineup for us against that lineup for Houston. So there's probably value in not starting Morris, right? Or not starting Kuzma, right? And just inserting Dwight so that you can maintain that rotation. So I suppose within the context of that, I just talked myself into, if JaVale's out, start Dwight.
I still think there's a way to be able to keep that lineup together and match up those minutes against the Hardenless lineup. The one thing as you were talking about it, why did Rivers only play 7? Did he get hurt?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, maybe that was D'Antoni's. So he's very tight with his rotations, but that's a curious one for sure.
So the reason I ask about Rivers, they don't have anybody else on their team who can do any kind of creating, right? And I would say probably if I were D'Antoni, I would probably match up like the minutes that Harden sits. I would have to have Rivers out there. And maybe even not Westbrook. So maybe try to sit Harden and Westbrook at the same time and bring in Rivers and hope that can get you by for the a couple minutes here and a couple minutes there that Harden isn't playing. You're only talking about, he played 39 minutes, so you're only talking about 9 total minutes that you have to get by. But yeah, I don't know how that's going to look. I'm really interested to see what Vogel opts for here. And I'm just happy to be able to go into tomorrow and not freaking out about being down 0-2. That is not something that I would have particularly enjoyed. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Lakers podcast. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. Thank you very much to the Lakers for not making me freak out about being down 0-2. Appreciate that, you guys. I will be back. I'm going to answer all of the questions. We switched it up, so tomorrow's show is going to be a mailbag show. So get your questions in the form of a 5-star review on iTunes, and then I'll also go back into the questions that you guys had for Pete and me earlier, I guess last week, when he and I answered questions together. So that'll be for tomorrow's show, and then Pete and I will be back to recap Tuesday night. Have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's. And we'll talk to you.
Hi guys, this is Josh Lloyd, host of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. The NBA is back, so that means that fantasy basketball is back in one form or another. We've got daily fantasy, but there's also some fantasy leagues with the resumption of play with these 8 regular season games in Orlando, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to have you covered. It's not just for fantasy basketball though, because we recap all of the games across the NBA, so if you're looking for a broad overview of the action across the league every day, Locked On Fantasy Basketball is the podcast for you.